Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer LB4373-400-632 is what it is. Okay. You'll note it says 2 each there. These are sold per hinge. This just happens to mean that there are 2 hinges in this box. You're not obligated to buy in multiples of 2. Here's what the hinge looks like. This is what an LB4373 looks like, and what that refers to is all the dimensional properties about the hinge, basically. The fact that it has 5/8 radius corners. The fact that it is a hinge that is arranged with a template pattern screw hole location, a half moon or a semicircle, and a zigzag pattern, people will call this, on the other leaf. So the combination of this template pattern, this zigzag pattern, these 5/8 radius corners on all 4 corners, that means 4373, LB4373. Now the 400 in the part number means that it is 4 inch tall, also means it's 4 inch wide, but not every hinge from Bommer that's a spring hinge, that's a 400, is exactly 4 inch wide. Some of them are an odd size where they have a short leaf. At least one of those does. The 632 in the part number means 3 things. First, it means it is made of steel. It is in a polished brass plated finish, and then it has a lacquer applied. We can see a little bit of evidence on the lacquer overspill on the backside where they got a little too much lacquer on there. Now, where are you going to use this? Why do you need it? Let's talk about that now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Well, you likely need this hinge because you need a spring hinge on your door. That's almost all but certain while you're looking at this hinge. And you have a requirement that is met with this odd combination of screw hole locations. Bommer manufactures about a dozen or so different hinges like this that are meant to accommodate different manufacturers' applications. The 4373 is unusual for us to sell. It's just not common. It's designed, looking at the extended description, to fit standard hinge preparation of Heritage 1 doors and frames. Heritage 1 must be or must have been a company who made, most likely, metal-clad doors and metal frames. And the reason I believe that they're metal is because the factory only included machines. There's a single wood screw in here. That's probably there by mistake. They've included only machine screws with the order. Okay, thread forming. These are probably 1032 machine screws. Actually, they could be a 1224 with a number 10 head, is what that may be. Thread forming is that little preparation, that cut, that slit, that notch that's in the edge, the tip of the screw that allows the paint to be cleared as you're putting the screw into the tapped holes. Thread forming allows a little bit of that to be cut through as you're installing the hinge. Most people, you're supposed to take a tap and clean out the holes on a steel frame, because when the factory makes the frame, they will take the flat steel, they will shear it to size, they will put it in they will punch it in the flat, they will put it in a press brake, they'll bend it, and then they will weld in all the reinforcements. They'll hang it on a hook on a conveyor system and run it through the paint booth. Well, the paint gets everywhere, including in the threads, so you're supposed to clear those tapped holes out. Frames could also be roll formed as well, where there's flat steel, a coil of flat steel, and there's a series of dozens or scores of different rollers that are arranged down the path of where the steel goes through, and there's a very micro adjustment every stage of the roll former that at the end you are pushing through complete, material. That's a really neat operation. A roll former is pretty cool. I don't know how Heritage 1 made or makes their frames. Doesn't really matter. I just went down a rabbit hole, I suppose. So Heritage 1 is what you're looking for, apparently. And we're going to take a look at this template. This is the technical drawing or template for this hinge to show you where those locations are. 5/8 radius, you know, that would generally be something I'd see in a wood application. 5/8 is 1/2 inch and a quarter. So if you're using an 1 1/4 diameter router bit to route the jambs and the doors, you're going to be left with a 5/8 radius. You can either buy 5/8 radius corner hinges, provided they're available, or you can square out the corners and use a square corner hinge, which is almost always available. Okay, this hinge is going to include, being a spring hinge, it's going to include at least 1 tension rod for every order that you place, and 1 tension pin right there for every hinge that you order. This spring hinge from Bomber requires 1 tension pin. Others require 2. This one requires 1, and we'll go over the adjustment in a moment. You'll note that this has a UL stamp on it, and I'll show you an image of that. R-667653M grade 1 door closer body, listed ULC and UL and ULC. UL and UL Canada. I had a client call me yesterday, a couple days ago, and said, I need this R667653 hinge. I need that hinge. Send me a picture of the hinge, I said to the client, because, as I said earlier, there's about a dozen of these. They're all stamped R667. Stop listening to me. 653. They're all stamped that. But all 12 of their hinges are definitely different. Then you've got at least 2 different possibilities in sizes, and sometimes 3. The client, basically exasperated, says, I don't understand, why you can't just give me a hinge. And I'm thinking, well, we've narrowed it down to a dozen or more options. I don't know how many other hinges Bomber will stamp that on. It could be scores of them. I don't know. Got the client to send me a picture of the hinge, but first I sent them the catalog and said, go to page 50. You see there are 5 options there? Go to page 52. There are 12 options there. They all say R4667-653M. The client then sent me an image of the hinge like this, which didn't help very much, because as I said earlier, this, and this all collude to make this a 4373. But giving the client the catalog, they told me what the part number of the hinge was. Okay. I was then able to determine the tension rod and tension pin that they need. The long story short of that is that's on every hinge they make, a stamp, when it's a spring hinge, because in NFPA 80, which is the standard by which code draws from, it states specifically in the National Fire Protection Agency's 80 publication that spring hinges on fire doors must be labeled. If you look at a fire door with ball bearing non-spring hinges, there's no stamp on it. That's okay, they don't have to be stamped, provided that they are ball bearing, that they are either steel or stainless steel base material. They're expressly approved for use on a fire door. Spring hinges are not, unless they are stamped. So when the client told me that they have this, I know that they have a hinge that's listed for use on a fire door, but I have no idea which hinge it is. I couldn't tell you. If you're ever in New York City, you'll see, if you're a tourist or if you live there, you're going to see lots of Bomber hinges everywhere on lots of fire doors, especially in older hotels. They still have Bomber hinges that are 5, 6, 7, 10 decades old and on their fire doors. So, and they're very different hinges than these. So it's impossible to really know, based on R667 or 653M, what you have. So you either send us a picture of this so I can see what it is and then ask better questions, or go to the Bomber catalog and, as this client did, give me the part number and I can tell you what tension rod and tension pin you need. Because what happens is, over the original installation, the hinge gets installed on a fire door, the tension is set, everything works, great. 20 years later, the new owner doesn't want the door to self-close, pulls the pin out, throws it in the garbage. 10 years later, the third owner gets inspected. The inspector says, these doors have to self-close. Now they're on the hunt for tension pins, is the bottom line. Speaking of tension pins, only ever use the original tension pins from the manufacturer. I'm aware of 2 instances where Bomber was named or Bommer products were named in a lawsuit because someone harmed themselves on a tension pin that was basically a 4-penny nail that's been cut and stuck in there. I won't bore you with the details of how a youngster and then an adult in a prior case hurt themselves, but it was sticking out. A piece of sharp metal was sticking out is the bottom line. The original tension pins are designed to work correctly and to sit flush with that outside of this tension collar. So use the original equipment on that, most definitely. Also, it has the Bommer logo on there. We'll touch on that in a moment. So I think what we'll do now is let's switch to the screen view, and we'll take a closer look at the supporting documentation. Before we do so, this hinge will always be made of steel because it's a listed product. Onto the steel base, you can do your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, satin, polished, nickel, oil-rubbed bronze, a dozen and a half finishes for sure, so you're not limited. This just happens to be good old 1980s polished brass is what it is. Good old finish. All right, let's switch to the screen view and do a little deeper dive. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, here's the next step in our hinge review. This silhouette that you see here, this line drawing, that's wrong. We know it's wrong. By the time you're seeing this video, that will be corrected. And I know that because when I look at the template, it has the proper design of our 4373. Okay, so back to our hinge. So why are you buying this? Well, you might need a spring hinge, no doubt. That's almost certainly why. Also, people will buy these because Heritage One, and I don't know anything about this company. I don't know if they're still in business, if they're like Peachtree, a relic from the past. Heritage One. Hard to say. They're very likely... Yeah, no idea. They could be out of business. You need to replace spring hinges, or, common as well, Heritage One is out of business, let's say. And you cannot get non-spring hinges from anyone. No one makes them. Well, Bommer makes a spring version, and you can always hang your door with a spring hinge and just simply not set any tension on it. And clients will this client ordered 2, so I'm thinking they're replacing 2 spring hinges, but have a ball bearing hinge to a Heritage One sort of layout installed in the top position of the door, which is where you want your non-spring hinge always, because that's the hinge that carries 70% of the weight of the door. But a client like this will say, I want to replace all of the hinges so the finish matches on all of them. And unless they can find someone who makes these hinges, because I don't know anyone who would, and we deal with residential hinges routinely, you'd end up buying all spring hinges. Dissecting that part number, this is an LB series from Bommer. That means it's a 3-knuckle hinge. There are 3 knuckles. They make LB series and non-spring hinges as well. 4373 is literally on the template, which we're going to go over in a moment. 400 is the size, 632 is the finish. It's a grade 1 hinge, means that it's been tested to 1 million cycles. I had asked the head engineer at Bommer one time, hey, how many cycles will the hinge go to? And he says, I don't know. I unplugged the machine at 7 million. So you can count on several decades of faithful service out of Bommer spring hinges. They are extremely proud of their spring hinge. And I've been to the plant. I've been inside the room on a guided tour where these hinges are tested, and I have been shown the secret ingredient of these hinges. And when Bommer plainly states they believe they have the best spring hinge on the market, when you see the engineering behind the secret ingredient, you'll quickly agree with that statement. And it's backed up by the fact that I get a call about once a decade by someone who says, yeah, your Bommer spring hinge snapped. And every time my batting average, well, not once a decade, once every 5 years, we'll find out what caused the failure. And in recent memory, the last 10 years, one client set the tension to about 12 holes of tension, and you'll see shortly that 3 is about where you would set that. and then the other client installed it backwards, meaning he installed it in a full surface application. So the hinge was set under reverse tension because he wanted the door to close, but when the hinge was already in the open position. And as soon as I described that scenario to the engineer at Bommer, he knew exactly what the client did. Surface mounted them. That caused, client says, about 30% of these hinges break. I says, that's impossible. I don't get one break, much less 30% of 25 hinges. That's a lot of failed hinges. Non-handed, you can install these on left or right-hand doors. Special template hole location designed to fit in Heritage 1. Pivot point aligns with residential butt hinges from 85 thousandths to 109 thousandths. That means the leaf thickness of the hinge is about 96 thousandths. You can't install a thicker hinge with this and mix and match. It won't work. Bright brass finish, 5/8 radius. There's your gauge, 96 thousandths. It's 3/32 of an inch is how thick the leaf is. The screw package, I'm assuming Heritage 1 is all machine screws. We'll find out if the client, if wood screws are what they needed. Maximum labeled door size 3070. That is right out of NFPA 80. You cannot install spring hinges on a door larger than 3070. If you have a 3'2" by 7" door, you can't use spring hinges to close it according to code, according to the standard. If your local code calls on the standard or references the standard, well, the standard is now part of the code. 85 pounds when you're using 2 spring hinges and 110 pounds when you're using 3. We'll get to that in a moment. These are the links to the replacement tension pins and rods. Template, let's take a look at the technical drawing. Now, I had said earlier that this hole location, that's called the template pattern. The term template is used 2 different ways. It's used first to describe the exact dimensional locations of holes in a hinge. So every 4-inch tall hinge that has screw holes to the template pattern, it's going to be this every single time. As your size of the hinge changes, the overall pattern remains the same, but the dimensions just change because the hinge size changes. Here's our zigzag pattern. If you're not sure if this is going to work, if you're not sure if an LB4373 is going to work, you're going to want to take the template and you're going to want to compare that against what you have. This is a full mortise hinge. You can see from that 38 thousandths of an inch. The hinge is meant to be mortised to the door and frame when the door is in the closed position. Now, so that's just a technical drawing that may be important to you if you want to make sure of what you've got. Why that's important, and I'll show you why. I want to pull up the catalog. We'll do a search for LB4373. Here are mostly 4-inch hinges. Well, all 4-inch hinges on this page. You can see as the part number changes. Yeah, that's weird. It's not in this catalog. This could be a hinge that I had added to the site one time because it didn't exist. Because this is still the 2010 product catalog. That's interesting. It's not in here. But the point is, as the part number changes, the hinge changes. So a 4384 has zigzag on both leaves. The 4376, which appears to be the same as the 4373, except one leaf has square corners. You can see as the part number changes, the corners and the location or the layout of the holes change as well. So that's why it's important to have access to that template. Okay, now next thing is installation instructions. The bottom line is this. When you have the hinge, and actually let's just take a look at the photographs that we have. The box, there's our hinge. When you have the hinge and you're ready to install it, this area up here is the tension collar. You'll install that towards the top of the door, regardless of it being left hand or right hand. That's the backside. Overspray of lacquer. Lots of fingerprints there. That's the important stuff if you have a fire door. That information has to be on there. I had a client one time ask, where are my hinges? I'm like, well, they're shipping in a week. What's taking so long? Well, they're made to order. I wish I would have known that. Well, we dig a little deeper, and I'm looking for some way to salvage the client's impression that his expectations haven't been met. I asked the client if the door is fire rated, because I note that the spring hinge he's ordered is not UL listed at all. It's an Asian import knockoff of a Bommer hinge. He says, yeah, that's why I'm ordering these spring hinges. Those doors are fire rated. He says, well, it's very good that they've not shipped, because what you've bought is not listed or approved for use on a fire door. We got them shipped, swapped over to Bommer hinges, and while there was still a lead time, the client was very grateful that we were able to, at the end, get him what he needed, but what he actually needed without realizing what he needed. Trying to show the finish a little better, and then the screws that come with it. Now, when the tension collar is pointed towards the top, and I'll demonstrate this by the end of the video, you'll insert the tension rod and then rotate it clockwise. When you do that, you'll reveal a new hole and you'll insert a tension pin. If the door goes to 180 degrees, 3 holes max. If you're only going to go to 90-degree opening, then you can go to 4 holes. The rest of this I'll leave to you to read, but it's that simple. If you hear creaking on your hinge, you might want to check how many holes of tension you've put there, because that's the spring contorting inside of the barrel. Then we have certifications and hinge selection guide. This just will tell you the important stuff that I've referenced a couple of times about fire-rated doors. NFPA 80, if you are in the door business, whether you are an architect, a designer, a contractor, an installer, a distributor, you'll want to have familiarity at least where to find NFPA 80, because it does govern everything that we do when it comes to fire-rated doors. There is no working with fire-rated doors without an understanding of NFPA 80. Talks about the fact that spring hinges, may not work all the time. And they may not, is the bottom line. Spring hinges are a very inelegant way, an undependable way to get a door closed, in my opinion. It's just a spring. It's not a hydraulic surface-mounted closer. You have to basically have stored energy and release the door, and it has to get the door not only closed, but latched. And sometimes it doesn't get it all the way closed, or sometimes it slams and it doesn't latch reliably. So spring hinges, in my opinion, are sometimes the only option, and I understand that, but they're not the most reliable way to close a door. That would be hydraulic control over a door with a surface closer or a concealed closer. Okay. The other notes on here I'll leave to you to read as well. Before we switch back to the screen, the camera view, I'd like to show you a link to the manufacturer's page, which is here. When you click on that, you'll be able to pull up here's the page, not only all of the Bommer products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation as seen here, but also a link to the manufacturer's website as seen here, as well as a link to the full product catalog as seen here. I would recommend you review that catalog if you ever deal with spring hinges, either single acting like this is, or double acting. The ubiquitous double acting spring hinge from Bommer is the 3029 series. There is no doubt that you have seen this spring hinge lots of different times. I think it's even on the cover of their catalog, their website. And indeed, yes, there it is. That ubiquitous hinge, double acting, you'll see those all the time. They make a lot more hinges than just the spring hinges, though. You can see examples of them here. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Now, as I made it seem earlier, I'm not a fan of spring hinges, and I'm not. And it's because they don't always work, is the bottom line. The point is to get the door closed. Well, very often, the door doesn't close, or the door slams and it causes premature damage to the opening. But having said that, you know, sometimes that's what you're dealing with. The contractor's looking to cut money, and they're going to put spring hinges on all the stairwell doors in the 6-story condo building. And so, you know, you've got 6 plus one lower level, possibly a roof level. Let's say 7. You've got a stack of doors here. You got a stack of doors here. Depending on the size of the building, there could be 7, 7, 7, 7. So let's say 14 doors, 14 door closers. The time to install it all, spring hinges are easy and cheap. You're already installing hinges. So with the tension collar pointed up, meaning the point of saying all that is I get why people want spring hinges. You rotate it clockwise, you reveal new additional holes. Into one of those new holes is what you're going to stick the tension pin into. So just going to take the tension pin, going to put it in there. Now I'm not sticking it all the way in, and the reason I can is because I have my tension rod in the way. If I back that out a little bit, I can push that or get it repositioned. I can push that pin in further. Whoop. Anyway, push it into the point where it's flush is what I'm driving at. And that's how you'll set tension on this, so it's super easy in order to do that. Anyway, the tension will then be set on the spring hinge. You'll push it in flush because those holes are drilled all the way through the tension feature that's at the top of the hinge. So that's how you'll set the tension. Hang the door normally. Door is closed. Put 1 or 2 holes of tension on there. And again, installing a spring hinge at the top location is the last place you put it. Put it at the middle and then bottom. Set a couple of holes of tension. Cycle the door a couple of times and then adjust accordingly from there. You want to make sure that you keep this piece of black tempered steel somewhere should you need to adjust it in the future. And the fact of the matter is, that's why one reason I don't like spring hinges, because you'll have a 3-flat building, you've got spring hinges on the exterior door where there's an intercom and a very low cost, low quality electric strike. The amount of tension it takes to close that door in the winter is different than it is in the summer. You've got different air pressures, especially with how the people are using the building, windows open, things of that nature. Adjusting the spring hinges can be either it doesn't work, it doesn't work. One more hole of tension, now it slams, now it slams. The door closer will give you a little better control. So that's how you set the tension. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo. The Bommer logo. I was hoping that would focus a little bit better there. Right above it, it says Made in USA. That's a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Other manufacturers' logos will say USA on it. That doesn't mean the hinge is made in the United States. That may or may not matter to you. It does to me. It most definitely does to Bommer. Everything that they do is domestically manufactured there, meaning not only are there plants in the Carolinas, but everything, all their raw materials are domestically manufactured. They're able to get projects that other people can't because of the origin of the material that they use in the manufacturing process. As a result of that fact and several other facts, I'm quite partial to Bommer. If you have any questions on the LB4373, 400, 632, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.